It is 5:38. So our continued hearing tonight, unfortunately, we don't have a quorum, so we're gonna have to continue it. We're gonna continue it until Thursday, Thursday the 28th at 5:30.
I'll make a motion to continue to date certain Thursday, September 28th at 5:30 p.m.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
All right,
that's
sorry.
Thursday or Monday.
Okay.
So, you know, if you have any questions in the meantime, to do that, obviously, yeah.
I think my only question I have is with the, so the police chief, they definitely would like a second entrance.
I think that's something for the future to think about with regards to any maybe zoning bylaw amendments related to that. If there was a requirement for a second egress, that we should put that in the bylaw.
Well, he said he's got an excavator showing
Right.
up this week.
And
for
I think
that
that's,
egress.
Just
I
to
think
kinda
that's
like-
fine.
Yeah.
So I think if we can generally talk about this without talking about the permit.
Right.
Yeah, it seems as if the concerns regarding special event venues are specific to single events, a second set of access or egress depending on the site, but presumably I'm going to think that the emergency services will want an additional access point.
Okay.
So that's something to consider for future, any future bylaws.
And I think the other thing that they mentioned that we should probably talk about with you is something about, you know, in the case of a special permit, they wanted a detail officer. And I think the magic number was 150.
Yes.
However, it said that, you know, case by case basis.
I mean, I think generally it allows them to utilize that property for the purposes of a commercial use without having to come to the planning board for any future use. This is special event venue. I think the only thing to note is that those applicants are going to be, depending on their event, whether they're serving alcohol, whether they're have like a very large event, those permits will need to be pulled. So it's not like they're done with business with the town. There's probably always going to be some sort of business with another department, just not the planning board.
Right.
And I think the reason why the town wanted to look at this was to understand that there are large parcel owners that wanted to use their properties for these types of things, and to create a mechanism by which to address and to know which properties are those being used for commercial purposes. Because there still is a requirement for filing every year with the town clerk's office that I am a business, this is, you know, and I'm using my property for my business.
Right.
So, in addition to every individual site is different, and every plan for every event is different. But I think the planning board's purview is very specific to the site, and the considerations based on the comments that the various entities have brought forward. And as I said, you know, wrote all of those notes, and that's the starting place.
Okay.
And I think as you read through them prior to a meeting, these are probably conditions that are going to be similar all across the board, generally. So.
Okay.
Okay. So the other thing we have is food trucks.
Yeah.
Food truck policy as an ongoing discussion question.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember where we left with that.
I think we left,
So we left with it being either a select board policy or a planning board, like requiring a zoning bylaw.
Okay.
And I think I shared with you the Wellfleet example.
Yep.
And that was a select board policy, so all of the permitting went through them. Where the planning board got involved was just, basically probably, and this would probably be administrative, that the building inspector would sign off on what district it's allowed in, because that's based on the zoning, right? So if you were to put in this policy, food trucks are not allowed in R1 zones or RS, residential single family, RSF zones, which could be an issue because a lot of your large parcels do that, then is there a need for the planning board? If you're gonna presume that everything is gonna be site-specific, what is the zoning, or what are the zoning protections for food trucks?
Right.
If you're not gonna prohibit them in certain parts of town.
And I think the general consensus was that the fact that it costs so much for permitting, that it was, not allowing food trucks to be able to come to Granby to set up, and it was very cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I think that we probably just need to do some more research as to what the town is requiring.
Okay.
And so it seemed, based on the two folks from
Chateau Harmony?
Yes.
Yep.
That the town had many fees attached to permitting food trucks.
It sounded like the town didn't recognize food trucks yet and kind of associated it like with opening a restaurant.
Right.
And it was difficult and expensive.
Right. Yeah, and it seems, and I think there is this weird definition between food trucks and restaurants that people use, because restaurants are not the same as food trucks.
Right.
Yeah, so it is a land use issue that towns are trying to grapple with, because they want to be able to permit them, but they also, if there are restrictions, want to be able to do that. But I also think that it may make more sense if it is like a select board policy, rather than carried in your zoning bylaw.
Because the other thing too, right, if we have, food trucks are temporary.
Right.
They're commonly set up for a day or
Right.
the weekend. Is that something, so every time that has to come in front of us and we have to, it might get a little, and that's why we put it back to the select board.
I don't think so.
No.
And I think the only reason that it should come, maybe back to us or the select board is if a food truck or single entity is gonna be somewhere for maybe 2 to 3 weeks or longer, more of a permanent food truck, then maybe it has to be a different permit. I don't know. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think kind of like Ken was saying, I think we need to know what the town is requiring first.
Right?
I do like the idea of this board only really regulating the zoning, and that's,
So
let the select
yeah.
board do the rest.
the example in Wellfleet, if I were to just do a find, using the find function, zoning compliance really is the zoning board of appeals may issue for up, so this says, by building department sign off may be required, so the building department, the planning board probably has nothing to do with it. It's all done through the building inspector. These regulations are intended to supplement and not usurp existing state law and regulations where applicable. Should these regulations conflict with state law regulation will control. In addition, and where applicable, any zoning board of appeals permit issued for private property or any contract entered into and authorized by the town through a request for proposal public procurement process for use of public property for the operation of a food truck shall supersede and have precedence over these regulations. So the way that I read that is there may have to be a permit with the ZBA for the purposes of the town using a RFP process, looking, to see who can operate a food truck for, like, let's say an event, for the use of public property for the operation of a food truck. So the ZBA may impose conditions upon a permit if the town is doing some sort of food truck
It's confusing.
That seems very intense for like
for a town like Granby.
for a town like Granby. I mean, obviously Charter Day, we have many food trucks that come in, but on any given day, I don't foresee there
Yeah.
the need for.
And I think the biggest thing here also is the next paragraph says, the use and operation of a food truck is not regulated by the zoning bylaws of the town. So, the use of a food truck is not in the bylaw, and the planning board or the ZBA would not have any sort of interaction with it. The only way that that I think it's suggested is that in the policy, there are signs, so signs are regulated by the zoning, but also in the policy, it says, there are certain districts by where this food truck, in Wellfleet,
Yep.
they can be permitted with conditions or prohibited, depending on that. So it's like an indirect use of the zoning bylaw by saying you can have these food trucks in these districts, and the select board can impose certain conditions. But, yeah, I think that's also a discussion, because if the planning board is not looking to add a zoning bylaw to address this, then really the conversation is with the select board.
Okay, so this way, the planning board really has nothing to do with. So do we have to make a recommendation to the select board to kind of open discussion about the food truck policy and make suggestions?
I think that's an opportunity for the planning board to do that, yeah. I don't know if there is any more, if in your conversation or in your thoughts regarding food trucks, if you think there is a need for food trucks to be regulated in the zoning bylaw, then obviously that's something we should be discussing. But
Well,
I
members
think-
of the community did come to us, right, and asked us to revise or look at our food truck policy. Is that correct? That's how it came to us?
That was my understanding based on a conversation with Jim.
Got it. Okay. So maybe we do like talk about and make some suggestions about food trucks, like to send to the select board. I think that might be a good idea. If we have nothing to do with it, just to make the process easier going forward in the future. And I don't so would you write the email to the head of the select board?
Yeah, and what I can do is share for your next scheduled meeting, share a draft of that email prior, if you
Okay.
think that that's appropriate. I think, my recommendation is, I think there needs to be a town-wide policy, and the planning board shouldn't be related to the zoning bylaw.
Right.
So I guess some of the suggestions would be, it would be signed off by the building inspector.
Yeah,
Right.
well.
Or the permit would be, instead of having to come for a special permit in front of one of the boards, it would just go right to building and they'd be able to.
If there was a need for the building department to review a permit, so presumably that would only be signs. Because if you're not requiring parking, because parking is probably consideration
Yeah.
for food trucks, or however you're trying to address parking, if you think you need to. That I could foresee, being something that may need to be addressed in the zoning.
So have them just be able to do an application, and then that's it.
Yeah, I'm looking at a town that just passed the zoning bylaw this town meeting.
Kind of a weird topic to navigate.
I know. And then I guess another thing would be, allowing it in a residential area for personal use only for like a day or a certain event, a
Like a
time
kid's
period.
birthday
Like
party
a
or
kid's
something.
birthday party.
I'm sure there'd be some angry residents if somebody just plopped one in front of their
Right,
house
and-
for the public.
Right.
I mean, I think, I'm looking at, so the town of Concord just passed something this past spring. And I think the big takeaway is they added it to their zoning. It's allowed in all districts. So it says, a mobile food establishment in all districts, mobile food establishments are permitted on a temporary basis, subject to the following requirements. A mobile food establishment may conduct business on private property for a private event for the property owner or tenant and their invitees. On municipal property when previously authorized by the town manager, or on public roadways when previously authorized by the select board or their designee. A mobile establishment shall have all required permits by the health department and the board of police department. A property may have mobile food establishments in operations thereon for a maximum of 52 days per calendar year. So a zoning bylaw can create those types of criteria. And so obviously up to the town to administer that, right?
Right.
If you're gonna put a day limitation on how many times they can show up. So presumably 52 days per calendar year is 1 day a week, right? No more than 2 mobile food establishments shall be located on a property at the same time. The board may permit additional mobile food establishments on a private property, provided the board finds the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood and without jeopardizing the public safety. The select board or their designee may permit additional mobile food establishments on municipal property. So you can have more than one, but there is a process by which you would do that. A mobile food establishment that is an accessory use to a restaurant and has a valid base of operation license from the health division shall be exempt from section blah, 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 and permitted to park on the property on which the restaurant is located. So if you had a large parcel where there happened to be a restaurant, you could still also operate a food truck.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
your-
Thai place up the road
Yeah,
here.
like your
somewhere.
dad, yeah. Then it talks about ice cream, mobile food establishments. Shall be permitted to travel public roads, vending said products, but shall not park for extended periods of time on a public road except to the extent otherwise permitted by law. So that's not really any criteria, just you can't
Right.
be there for a long time.
Right.
And then a mobile food establishment permitted pursuant, so it looks like they have a section of the bylaw where, yes, you can have a mobile food establishment as an accessory to a restaurant. So, yeah,
I think those all sound fair, maybe.
so they're fair, I mean, they sound like criteria that, can be contemplated, but those now are in a zoning bylaw. So, there's still a permitting process by which you're now working with the property owner to have a food truck, rather than a food truck operator, which probably would be the other way, right?
Does it say anything about fees? What the fees are?
Let's see. Concord. Concord is, Eastern Mass, so sure the fees might be high. Let me see, it would be permitting fees. So if it was a planning board, special permit. Fee schedule. 200.
It seems like a lot. I wonder what the average is.
I mean, for a day, that's outrageous, I think.
That's a lot.
And
Well,
remember,
the important thing to remember, it's for the property owner. It's not for the vendor.
gotcha.
So it's the property owner, the way it's written.
So the property owner would take out the permit for
Their property,
an
say,
extended period of time.
yeah, and working with a food vendor or food vendors, knowing they have these criteria.
So if someplace like Chateau Harmony wanted to have a food truck for 2 food trucks for an entire season or 52
Days.
days, they could, but they would just have to pay the 200.
You'd still have to, so the food trucks are still responsible for getting their Board of Health,
Right.
Right.
and that requirement. But it's allowing the property owner to operate a food truck on their property.
Right. Which if they're going to have, food trucks all the time, it's worth it.
It sounds fair.
So maybe what I can do
Depending on the
is
property. maybe
present
there
to
should be-
present to the board, like basically this versus that.
Okay.
Like, what does it look like if the town were to just adopt at the select board level, a policy by which they review all food truck permits?
Right.
Or the planning board, similar to the special event venue, right? Because you're working with the property owner to use their property for those types of things. So, similar to that, if there was someone that had a special event permit venue and you had adopted a food truck bylaw, presumably if they wanted to operate food trucks on their property, they'd be getting both.
Yeah, and I think that they could do, if they do 52, it could be like 200. And if it's like, maybe like 10 uses is
Yeah,
like.
I mean, and then you can always adjust that through the
Right.
fees. But, every fee should be different, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Or single use should be different.
Right.
Or,
Commercial use for a special permit should be a lot more.
especially if it's for 1 calendar
Yeah.
year.
So, that's where, it's the town thinking about how they want to view food trucks. Because it seems at the moment, people are going to the select board and the select board are providing them like what you have to do, and it just becomes cost prohibitive.
Agreed.
Because there's no policy.
Right.
And I think if everyone is on the same page, then, there could be an opportunity to have food trucks and have events that have food trucks.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it is something that I think a lot of communities want, like that
Right.
economic development in town, bringing people to town.
Yeah, and it's probably tough to regulate it by certain business zoning areas too, because there are certain things, there's gun clubs, there's farms throughout Granby that are not in those districts.
Right, and I think that Concord example says they're allowed in
In every
district.
zone, yeah.
And it does provide language for those that, if I were to have a birthday party or have a wedding, you know, and I wanted a food truck in front of my house, that I'd be able to do that.
For my invite, for the
my
invitees. only.
invitees, right. And I think that could be also captured in the private event, because it is a private event, right? And who's ever operating that, yeah, so.
So you'll draft an email?
It'll be more so for the planning board initially, I think, just so that maybe we're on the same page, and I think if, you know, at the next meeting, that second Monday in October, that, you know, you can figure out what to do from there. I won't be at the meeting on the 4th, Monday in October. But, yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else that they want to discuss?
Is there anything, other new business or anything else you wanted to discuss?
I don't have minutes, so
Okay.
that'll be.
Nothing new in here for discussion,
Okay.
so.
So did you want to make a motion to close the public hearing? Well, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Just the regular meeting.
Oh.
We never opened
Oh,
the
that's
public
right.
hearing.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to close the meeting at 6:06 PM.
I will second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.